Boeing's influence in the commercial aviation industry has been steadily declining, allowing Airbus to gradually but decisively assert dominance in the industry. And now, the situation could get even worse for Boeing after one of its long-term customers, KLM, made a shocking announcement. In an unprecedented move, the Dutch national carrier has announced that it will not be considering Boeing aircraft for its long-haul fleet upgrade. Instead, the airline is turning to the Airbus A350. So, why has KLM made this shocking decision? And what does losing such a long-term loyal customer mean for the American aircraft manufacturer? Let's get into it. To understand why KLM's announcement has sent shockwaves throughout the aviation industry, we need to look at its background and its relationship with Boeing. To do that, we need to rewind time back to the 1930s when the airline acquired its first ever Boeing aircraft, the Boeing 307 Stratoliner. Unfortunately, the airline lost this aircraft in a crash in 1939. It was not until 1967 when it would go on to make an order for its second ever Boeing aircraft, and this time it was a Boeing 747. In the years that followed, the airline forged a strong relationship with Boeing, and as of 2024, 90% of its fleet is made up of Boeing aircraft, with Airbus enjoying a meager 10% share in the fleet size, including ordered units. It's safe to say that KLM and Boeing had a pretty strong relationship. It is important to note that KLM was later acquired by Air France in 2004 to form Air France KLM. In fact, back in 2005, under Air France Industries KLM Engineering and Maintenance, they even teamed up with Boeing to create new performance standards for the Boeing 737 next generation fleet through the 737 Component Services Program. By 2019, this relationship seemed to get even stronger as the airline announced that it would not take up any of the 7 Airbus A350-900s that it had ordered back in 2013. The chief executive, Ben Smith, was quoted saying that in the near future, KLM would only use the Boeing 777 and 787 Dreamliner as their long-haul fleet, eventually retiring its 13 Airbus A330. This move would have made KLM an all-Boeing carrier. In early 2020s, there was speculation that KLM was on the verge of replacing its aging Boeing 777s and Airbus A330s with some of the 777s in its fleet dating back as early as 2003. You would be forgiven to think that, based on the strong relationship between the airline and Boeing, the choice of the replacement would be a no-brainer. The thing is, there were even unconfirmed reports that the airline was about to make an order for Boeing 787 Dreamliners to replace the aging fleet. However, to the shock of many people in the industry, KLM announced that it was considering the Airbus A350 wide-body jet. So, why did KLM decide to pull the plug on its long-running camaraderie with Boeing for its fiercest rival, Airbus? There are multiple factors that could have compelled KLM to select the A350 over the 787. One such factor is range. The Airbus A350 can comfortably cover a range of 9,300 miles, carrying between 300 and 350 passengers. Its bigger variant, the Airbus A350-1000, can carry between 350 and 410 passengers over a maximum range of 10,300 miles. This is a significant advantage over the 787 Dreamliner, which can accommodate between 248 and 336 passengers and cover distances ranging between 8,406 miles and 7,280 miles, depending on the specific variant. This implies that, with either of the Airbus variants, KLM will be better positioned to announce new destinations in many parts of the world. Also, suppose the airline decides to ask Airbus to redesign the A350 with extra fuel tanks. There's really nothing standing in its way. It could join the likes of Singapore Airlines and Qantas in offering those ultra-long-haul flights that stretch just shy of a day. The range aspect could also come in handy for KLM, especially at a time like this when the Russia-Ukraine war has seen the Russian airspace closed off to European carriers. To reach destinations in Asia and the Far East, airlines like KLM have had to reroute, adding extra hours and thousands of miles to their journeys to avoid Russian airspace. With the impressive range offered by the A350, KLM will make those longer flights much more manageable. In doing so, we also need to consider the extended range twin-engine operations performance standards for both airliners, as it would be a significant determinant for KLM when deciding to go with the A350. In this case, the A350 outperforms its Boeing rival, the 787, as it can fly more than 6 hours on one engine. This is 40 minutes more than the 787 Dreamliner. It is also obvious that KLM considered the fuel efficiency of the TOW airliners before making a decision to acquire the European aircraft. This is an important factor, considering that fuel prices are among the biggest cost factors for airlines. Suppose KLM was to deploy each of these aircraft to a destination that is 5,000 nautical miles away, and hypothesizing that the aircraft are full and each passenger has carried the acceptable limit of luggage, the 787 Dreamliner would burn about 1 gallon for every 102 miles, while the A350 would burn 1 gallon for every 98 miles. Although this might paint the picture that the 787 is more efficient, it is important to remember that the A350 has a higher seat capacity. This makes it the more efficient option when considering fuel burn per seat. But did KLM purely trigger the decision to purchase the A350 aircraft? Or did Boeing also play a role in this decision? In essence, KLM's decision to overlook the 787 in favor of the A350 could actually be said to be a result of Boeing's own doing. You see, the airliner has been a subject of a number of quality control issues that have raised questions on its overall safety. For instance, in 2019, KLM uncovered several issues with its 787 jets, including loose seats, missing or incorrectly installed pins, loosely fastened nuts and bolts, and even an unsecured fuel line clamp. The airline didn't hold back, stating that the 787's manufacturing quality was way below acceptable standards. More quality control issues followed, and in January 2021, Boeing halted the deliveries of the 787 in order to complete inspections relating to poor quality control. Deliveries resumed in March, but would later halt in May. These disruptions meant that Boeing was gradually accumulating a backlog of orders. To add salt to injury, the Federal Aviation Administration has found more issues that could further stall the deliveries of the Dreamliners. So, for an airline like KLM, which is in need of wide-body jets sooner rather than later, Boeing's ongoing challenges make it a less viable option. So, what does this move by KLM mean for Boeing? Well, it goes without saying that indeed, Boeing has lost a significant client in KLM. Actually, this is considered to be a double tragedy for Boeing, since KLM is also in the process of replacing all of its 737 aircraft with the more efficient and economical Airbus A321neo airliner. For Boeing, this should serve as a wake-up call to address the persistent issues plaguing the 787 Dreamliner. By resolving these problems, the company can begin to rebuild the trust it has lost with airlines and accelerate the delivery of Dreamliners off the production line. Only then can it regain its footing and provide airlines such as KLM with options to choose from. On a lighter note, there could be a wild card in KLM's decision to go the Airbus way, and that is the pilots. You see, KLM has been operating the Airbus A330s for quite some time now. Perhaps the A330 pilots managed to convince the airline that they really needed that empty space in front so they can lay their air charts, navigational aids, and even lunch without having to worry about the central column gliders getting in their way. Also, who wouldn't Airbus's fancy pull-out QWERTY keyboard that eases the use of onboard computers instead of the 1970s style A to Z keypad that Boeing features? Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.